Howdy my totally tubular gamers, and we are back with another ranking video, but it's a developer ranking video. And today's developer ranking video is going to be on Ryuga Gotoku Studio, also known as RGG. And so for this ranking retrospective kind of video, we're going to be looking at every game that RGG has developed in some way, shape, or form. For those of you who don't know, RGG is a Japanese developer based in Tokyo, Japan. The studio was officially established in August of 2011 and was first used to promote Binary Domain. However, the studio's origins can be traced all the way back to Sega AM11 back in 1998. A few restructurings later, and they were re-established as Amusement Vision in 2000, and they're best known for Super Monkey Ball and F-Zero GX, among other games. A few years later, Amusement Vision would eventually be totally rebranded into New Entertainment R&D Development, and the first game under this brand would be known as Yakuza. The original Yakuza was considered a risky release by publisher Sega with such a high budget, so many people working on it, and really no idea of how the market would accept a game aimed at adult Japanese males based in the Japanese underworld. The game would go on to be somewhat of a critical and commercial success in Japan, however it did not receive the same success worldwide. But it was enough success for Sega to greenlight a second and eventually third Yakuza game. And just to keep things confusing, the development team of Yakuza 3 and the spin-off Yakuza Dead Souls was referred to as Sega's CS1 team. After Dead Souls, they would be rebranded as RGG and would go on to release Binary Domain. Since Binary Domain, they have stuck with the RGG name, and it's clear that they are not going to be rebranding anytime soon. Thank you. So while clearly it isn't the most straightforward history of a company, RGG has been with Sega in some way, shape, or form over the last 20 or so years. It was when they were rebranded, though, to Ryuga Gotoku Studios that they've gone on to become Sega's most prominent developer. They are Sega's leading studio, and the Yakuza series has become quite iconic and somewhat of Sega's mascot along with Sonic the Hedgehog. Their games are primarily known for their well-written stories, superb in-depth characters, goofy minigames, and excellent combat. And for the Yakuza series in particular, they've become great snapshots of Japan. These are probably the most realistic depictions of Japan you can find in a video game. But they have dabbled in more than just the Yakuza series. I mean, even their first game was Binary Domain. And so we're going to be looking at every game that RGG has worked on. But before you ask, what about the games before they were known as RGG Studios, like when they were known as Amusement Vision? Those games are going to get their own list, but the first 4 Yakuza games have been remade/remastered in some capacity by RGG Studios, so they will be on the list. Dead Souls, though, is getting left out in the cold, but that's fine, it's not a very good game. We also won't be including any Japanese-only releases. They need to have been released in the West in some capacity, so no PSP Yakuza games and none of those really cool samurai Japanese titles. When it comes to my history with RGG Studios, I've been playing their games for almost 10 years. I got into the series around when Yakuza 4 came out in the West and have become a pretty die-hard fan of the Yakuza series. I've played through all the games, remakes and spin-offs included, and have even gone to the Yakuza Gate in person in Japan, and I gotta say it was awesome. But I've also played through all their other games. I've covered their entire back catalog. I am just a huge Sega fan and love pretty much everything they've put out. They've really not put out a single bad game minus one game. And this isn't the first time I've talked about the Yakuza games. I made a ranking video last year before Yakuza 7 was released, which has gone on to be viral somehow. And yes, I know the quality was bad and my tastes are questionable, but we're going to do a bit of a redo here and talk about all the games again and include Judgment and just everything this studio has put out. And yes, this list will be outdated eventually. RGG is not going anywhere. They're going to keep making games. They're going to probably make more Yakuza games, and I hope that it becomes outdated because I love this studio. We're going to be ranking the games based on their story, how great the combat is, how much fun I had with it, how memorable it was, just kind of everything. Yeah, really just everything. And as always, let me know in the comments your thoughts, if you think I'm an idiot, if you agree with my opinions, your favorite Yakuza game, or you want to make fun of how I say Yakuza. Like, share, sub, and after 5 minutes we're finally going to get started on this list. So what do I think is RGG's weakest game? Which one is their worst, air quotes? Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz HD is the only game that I think RGG Studios has made that is not very good. It's really the only bad game that they've made in my opinion. And this is barely even their fault. I thought the original Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz was not a very good game. I thought it was a very mediocre to at best average experience that was pretty gimmicky with the Wii Remote. However, bringing it to modern consoles and being able to play the game with a controller really just exposes how mediocre to bad this game actually is. Now, I'm a pretty die-hard Monkey Ball 1 and 2 on the GameCube kind of guy, so naturally when I played this, I was pretty inclined to not like it. There's bumpers everywhere, it's way easier than any of the old Monkey Ball games, and the physics, well, it's not the physics that I would like. The stages are all very forgettable and generic, none of them stand out, and I honestly couldn't even tell you 5 of the stages in this game. Like, that's how forgettable they were, and it was one of those games that you play, and then you can't recall like anything from it a few days later, if not just the next day. It was that generic. So it's like, okay, you didn't like the main game and the stages it has. What about party mode? Well, I didn't like party mode either. I didn't like what it brought to the table. I didn't really like any of the mini games. I didn't like how a lot of them controlled, and I just didn't really have any fun with this game in any of its modes. Now, the game's not awful. It's not terrible. It's not crazy broken or unplayable or something. It's just not very good. I didn't have really any fun with it, and I don't like it. And I know Monkey Ball fans really don't like this game. It makes me wonder why they even remade, remastered, whatever this is, why they even did this in the first place. I don't know why, but it's their worst game. Easy. Our next game is another port/remaster. It's Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown. Now, this came out this year, 2021, and is essentially a new version of Virtua Fighter 5. Now, Virtua Fighter 5, I've played quite a bit of it on the PS3. That was where I primarily played it, and I gotta say, I am not the biggest Virtua Fighter fan. I think the game is good, don't get me wrong, and it's got some solid fighting mechanics, and I'm sure on like a technical level it's probably there. It's just, it's not my type of fighting game, and when it comes to a 3D fighter, if it's not Tekken, I'm probably not playing it. I don't really have much experience with Ultimate Showdown. I mean, it looks just like a prettier version of Virtua Fighter 5, and that's really it. There doesn't appear to be anything really new with this version other than some cool throwbacks to the series. I mean, I don't really know why we don't have Virtua Fighter 6 at this point, but hey, Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, if you need another version and you want to play it on your PS4 or 5, you got it right here. Good game. I just don't really have it high on this list because Virtua Fighter is just not really a fighting game series I'm into, and I just didn't value this very much. But if you love Virtua Fighter, let me know in the comments. Our next one is an interesting game. It is Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise, released in 2018. Now, when this game came out, a lot of people were calling it just Yakuza with Fist of the North Star paint, and you know, that's pretty accurate for the most part. However, this game does do a number of things that are a little different from the usual Yakuza format. The game is still played from a third-person perspective and has a lot of beat-em-up action with some role-playing elements. But you do get to drive around the wasteland and explore. You do actually get to drive around in the car. This is pretty different. I wasn't huge on this, and the open world in general in this game I wasn't huge on, but you do get to actually explore it quite a bit. When it comes to Fist of the North Star, I don't really know all that much about it. I know the memes, and I know like the most basic story of Fist of the North Star, and that's really it. So maybe if like I was a mega fan, I would love this game and all its throwbacks more, but as it stands, I think this game is just alright. Like Yakuza, there's sub-stories to do, side quests to partake in, there's some crafting, there's even some mini-games you get to do, like where you play other Sega games in the Fist of the North Star world. Anyway, the combat, it has some good points to it. It plays pretty much the same as a Yakuza game in terms of combat, but they throw in some of that Fist of the North Star flair where Kenshiro just goes nuts. The game does bring in the hidden channeling point system, which I think was actually implemented pretty well. I thought it was pretty cool in this game, and making people blow up that's always going to be great. And the game does actually try to be more of an RPG. This game actually has leveling up, like legit levels on screen and everything. However, I think that this is one of the game's biggest downfalls, this game became incredibly grindy thanks to this. I never had to grind, air quotes, in any of the Yakuza games, but I had to grind in this game. I was just getting my ass whooped constantly in this game. Had to get better gear, had to level up, like, it was legit, and I think that the game really didn't need this at all. And it's one of the reasons I have this game lower than basically every other Yakuza game, because I didn't like the grinding. I thought the world was just kind of boring to explore. I wasn't big on the crafting at all. And the story was, well, I could take it or leave it. I mean, I don't really care all that much about Fist of the North Star. I'm not exactly the target audience here. I mean, if you are an absolute mega fan of Yakuza and you've played literally every other Yakuza game minus Dead Souls, then yeah, maybe you should try this game. I can recommend this game to Fist the North Star fans, and that's really it. Like, this is a for the fans kind of game. Otherwise, it's just okay. Our next game is Yakuza 3, which was originally by Sega CS1 R&D and was released in 2010 in America. However, it was re-released by RGG in 2019 for PS4 and then Windows and Xbox. Now, while I think that Yakuza 3 is a fine enough game, I definitely do think it is the black sheep of like the main Yakuza games, and it really stands out the most in terms of quality. Yes, this was the first Yakuza game to switch to the third-person camera. That is pretty important for the series. However, when it comes to just about every other aspect, I think it's really lacking compared to the other Yakuza games. I think the combat is just overall kind of clunky, and it doesn't really feel any better than the PS2 games. It's just not all that satisfying. I think the heat moves are easily the weakest heat moves in the whole series. They just do not look devastating, and they just didn't feel all that strong to use. The story, I thought, was just kind of questionable. It starts out really strong. It has a really interesting beginning with Kiryu and his orphanage. However, it quickly just devolves down into just kind of nonsense, and I didn't really like any of the plot twists at all in this game. I really do think that this is the weakest Yakuza story, like in the entire franchise. I think it's the weakest one. The presentation was also pretty terrible for when the game came out. The PS4 version, it looks a little bit better, but it's just not very good. And I didn't think that Okinawa was the most exciting map either. I thought the sub-stories in the game were generally lackluster, and I think that this was just a very average to alright game. But you let me know down below, because plenty of people told me on that last Yakuza video I made that I'm totally wrong in Yakuza 3 rules, but I stand by what I said. Our next game is RGG's most recent game, Monkey Ball Banana Mania, which came out this year. Now, Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania takes all of Monkey Ball 1, 2, and Deluxe and puts it all together for one super package. And while I wish I was here telling you that this is the best Monkey Ball game ever made and that this game rules, I think this game is just alright. This is easily the best Monkey Ball game post GameCube, but I still think it's just alright. The maps, legendary. They're all really, really good. I mean, it's the OG stuff. It's the best the series has ever been. However, it's everything around that I'm just not a huge fan of. They messed with the physics in this game. They made them a little slower, and it's just not the same. The game runs on Unity. It's not the same as the OGs. And you might go, well, does it have to be exactly like the OGs? Yeah, it's the original maps that were made with the original physics in mind. And a bunch of stuff you could do in those games you can't do here because the physics are different. If they were going to change the physics, they should have made new levels for the new physics, but they didn't. I think the new physics ruin a lot of the party games. I didn't like most of the party games here, and they got some really good ones like Monkey Target, but you know what? If I'm gonna play some Monkey Target, I'm hooking up the GameCube, I'm playing it on the GameCube, because I don't like the Monkey Target in this game. I don't like the physics. The multiplayer sucks. You can only play party games locally. I don't want to play the party games, I want to play on the maps together like I did in the old days. You can't even do that. No online, no local, nothing. Dog shit. The music sucks also. I don't know what this crap is. Where's the OG stuff? Oh, you gotta pay for it. You gotta pay extra to get the good music. Whatever. They fucked up the cutscenes also. These cutscenes are shit. But you know what? Despite all that, when you're actually just playing the single player and you're just playing through the game and doing the challenge modes and going through these maps, yeah, it's still pretty good. It's still pretty fun for the most part. It's not as good as the OG stuff, and all the issues I mentioned prevent it from being as good as the OGs, but you know what? I still think it is an alright game. So even though I just bitched for 2 minutes about it, I can still say that if you're a diehard Monkey Ball fan, maybe give this a shot, but just know going in, it's not the GameCube games and it's not as good. I had more fun with it than Yakuza 3 though, I can say that. Now our next game is RGG's first official game, Binary Domain, released in 2012. Now this is probably the only time I'll ever get to talk about Binary Domain, but Binary Domain is actually a really solid third-person shooter. I feel the game was actually quite underrated, with a really interesting story and a lot of mechanics that really I've not seen in many other games. It has a really cool premise where the world is pretty much destroyed by global warming, which is realistic, and there's worldwide flooding, making most of the world uninhabitable. So robots are used as a main labor force to help out the rest of humanity. This leads to basically another arms race and even a new Geneva Convention being created, and let's just say the world it gets pretty interesting with all these robots and people going around. The game actually brings up a lot of really good philosophical questions like what it means to be human, the soul, what happens when we die, and the game has a lot of really strong characters, and there's even multiple endings in the game. If you were going to play this game for one reason, it'd probably be the story, because I actually thought it was really solid and I was not expecting it to be this good. And on the surface, this game looks like a really generic third-person shooter, and in a lot of ways it is. It's a cover-based third-person shooter where you destroy robots with big weapons. If you've played Gears of War, yeah, you've pretty much played this. The gunplay feels pretty alright, and fighting the robots is fun. It's satisfying to destroy them. The AI is decently smart, but the big part of the game is that you get to talk to your squad mates using your microphone on your computer. Whether or not this works very well is a different story. The game is definitely best played without a microphone. It just doesn't pick you up very well. You can interact with your squad mates at a number of different points in the game, not just in combat either, and it can lead to different story outcomes, and you even get to have bonds with your characters. It's pretty cool stuff. But I think Binary Domain is actually a really solid game. I mean, yeah, it looks pretty generic on the surface. It looks like a standard run-of-the-mill third-person shooter. The game is dead when it comes to multiplayer, and it bombed financially. It sold like crap, but I think that if you ask anybody who played through this game, especially back in the day, they will remember it and tell you it's a good game. And if you see it in the bargain bin or on a Steam sale or whatever, I have no trouble telling you to try it. Just try it. You might be pleasantly surprised like I was, and I think that this game honestly deserves more credit than it gets. Our next game is Lost Judgment, which is the first Yakuza-style game to be released worldwide at the same time coming out this year. Now, Lost Judgment is the sequel to Judgment, and stars Tak and his buddy Kaito as they run the Yagami Detective Agency. It sees them getting called to Yokohama to investigate a bullying issue. However, things quickly get a lot more interesting than that, and I'll leave it at that. Now, Lost Judgment, while I think it is good, I actually was a bit disappointed by it in all honesty. The story was good, but it wasn't like great. It wasn't amazing. It didn't blow my mind like some of the previous Yakuza games were, or even the first Judgment. I thought the characters were solid, their motivations were good, but I didn't fall in love with the characters in the world and just the story in general. There's a few good twists here and there, but it just didn't feel as great or grand as some of the previous games. Maybe that's the vibe they were going for, was a lot more low-key, but it just didn't resonate with me all that much. Alright, story aside, the gameplay is pretty much what you've come to expect from a Yakuza-style game. You have your big open world where you can either partake in a bunch of goofy mini-games and interesting sub-stories, or you can take on the really serious crime drama story. And the combat is still real-time, it's still the beat-em-up combat that you know and love, and it feels pretty alright. It doesn't feel as great as, say, Zero's, or even really the first Judgments, in my opinion, but it's still pretty solid. There's a couple different styles here, and they all do feel really different, and the combat I thought had a nice flow to it. It was still decently fun to kick the shit out of people, and the heat moves, they're actually still pretty solid. So that's all well and good, and exploring the open world's always going to be fun in these games, and you even get a skateboard in this game. It's actually pretty fun to go around on the skateboard, I won't lie. However, like the first Judgment, this game really forces a bunch of gameplay styles onto the player that you do have to do, and these, I just don't really like these. Like the first Judgment, it's just not very good. These are all incredibly clunky, they feel shoehorned in, and they just aren't very fun, plain and simple. Like the stealth mechanics and really just following people in general, I did not like this at all. The parkouring, I did not like this at all either. I did not enjoy myself playing this. I was like, this is not good. This is not fun. This is not engaging. It feels very, very scripted, and I just didn't like it. And all these so-so gameplay styles combined with a story that I think is just good, and really after that banger of Yakuza 7 and even the first Judgment, I really was expecting something better, and that's why I'm a little disappointed with this game. I think it's just good, but I don't think they hit it out of the park. I think it's just a good game. If you like the first Judgment, you'll like this game. If you like Yakuza, you'll like the game, but I don't think it's going to grab you the same way that some of the other games have on this list. So here is Yakuza Kiwami 1, which is a remake of the original Yakuza game that was on PS2. However, this is for the PS4 by RGG and came out in 2017, at least in America. Now, there's no doubt about it, this game absolutely destroys the original PS2 game. It is the definitive and really the only way you should play the original Yakuza. The combat is leagues above the original Yakuzas as it brings in all the styles from Zero, and sure, it's not as good as Zero's combat, and some of the styles feel a bit questionable compared to Zero's, but it still is quite good. The graphics, majorly overhauled, and they look great. The story is superb in this game. It is fan-freaking-tastic. I love the story in this game. They even added some new cutscenes here and there to try to add some context. That's cool. One thing that I'm not a fan of this game is the music. I know some people have told me that the music's great and it's just remixes of the old shit, but I just do not like the music in this game. I've tried to get into it a couple times and I just cannot. I love the original PS2 music. I don't like this new music. It's just not me, man. I just don't like it. Aside from that, the game added the Majima Everywhere system where he just kind of attacks you everywhere. I thought this was a fun, novel concept at first, but I honestly did find it to be a bit annoying by the end of things. And I thought that the challenge was actually really steep in this game, especially if like this is your first Yakuza game. Can't be just me that thought that. I mean, I did fine. I'm a pro, of course, but steep challenge. And the sub-stories in this game, I could take them or leave them. I mean, the other Yakuza games just have much better sub-stories. And it's not even that Yakuza Kiwami does really all that much wrong. It's just that I think all the other Yakuza games are just that much better than this game. And I think it shows how far the series has come as a whole. I can say this is a great entry point, and if you want to see the first Yakuza game and all of its great story or a continuation of Zero, you'll really like this game. I guarantee it. Our next game is Yakuza 6, released on the PS4 in 2018. Now, Yakuza 6 is the last mainline Yakuza game to star Kiryu, and you play only as Kiryu, who's old as bones in this game. The combat has also been streamlined quite a bit. All the styles are gone, and it's kind of meshed together for one style. And you know, the combat was still pretty enjoyable. I still had a fun time with it. The heat moves, still really solid, and some of the fights you get into, they're pretty high scale, and there's some interesting aspects to them. The story is quite good. It is a really fitting end to Kiryu, and I think it is really solid, and I really like his interactions with just about everybody in this game, especially the new characters. It's always great to see Kiryu interact with young people. I love his interactions with the baby in particular. This is all great stuff. The side content in the game is good as well. It's not going to blow your mind like some of the other side content, but there's some fun minigames here. The new map, Hiroshima, I think it's a solid enough entry into the series also. This was the game to introduce the new level up system, which is what they would use for the next game as well, and I think it's just okay here. I think it was implemented better in Kiwami 2. Despite all this good stuff, the game is surprisingly really short, actually. It's the shortest Yakuza game outside of the PS2 games, and it really left me wanting more, actually. However, I have no problem recommending it, especially if you're a Yakuza fan. I think you'll really like how sweet the game's story generally is, and I think that you might shed a tear at the end. Maybe. And our next game is Judgment, released in 2019 on the PS4. Now, Judgment was the first non-Yakuza game that the studio had made in quite some time. It stars Yagami, who runs a detective agency with his partner Kaito, and let's just say they're investigating a case that's very close to Yagami and is very personal. The story in this game I actually thought was really good. It was actually very different from the other Yakuza games. You get to see the other side of the Yakuza stories, where you're the cop, you're the detective, you're the law. It was a very good crime drama, and the other Yakuza games are not like this. This game really did do something different, and I actually quite liked the story, and I really felt attached to these new characters. I thought they were really good. The backstory that's given for Yagami and Kaito, really solid, and you really come to actually appreciate them and care about them, and you really do want to see what happens. And I really was impressed with how quickly I gravitated towards these new characters. Now, despite the game taking place in Kamurocho and using its map, it really is its own standalone game. It has nothing to do with Yakuza, and you don't need to have ever touched Yakuza to get this. However, if you've played Yakuza, you probably will want to try this, as it plays very similar. The combat is pretty by the numbers. It plays how you would think a Yakuza kind of game would. It's got some really fun beat 'em up, the heat moves are cool, and there's a lot of interesting detective flair thrown in there where you get to be the cop and you do all these fancy maneuvers that, well, someone in the Yakuza wouldn't be doing. Now, while the side content has a lot of familiar stuff that you already know, the game does also have some new stuff that is actually pretty different, especially considering who Tak is, how different he is from Kiryu. Like, you can even get a girlfriend in this game. It's interesting. Now, realistically, I should have Judgment quite a bit higher on this list thanks to its good story, superb voice acting, and good combat. However, just like Lost Judgment, this game has a bunch of other types of gameplay that I'm not a fan of. It has tailing missions, it has these chase sequences, it has where you fly around in the drone, and it has these detective parts, and you know, I just don't really like these. I don't think they're very fun. I don't think they're all that engaging. It feels incredibly scripted, and there's only one way to go about all these. It's just incredibly clunky, and I just don't really like the other styles of gameplay in these kinds of games. I don't think they're very well done. and I think it really hinders this game from being truly amazing. I think it's just good because of that. And while a lot of the other Yakuza games have different styles of gameplay, they don't actually force them onto you like Judgment and Lost Judgment does. It makes you play them. Like, if you don't like them, too bad, you have to play them. In the Yakuza games, you don't like it, don't bother. And I certainly like it more than Lost Judgment, but I have the same issues with this game that I did with Lost Judgment. But this game is certainly better, and I have no problem recommending it to anybody who likes the Yakuza games or wants to try something different. And so here we have Yakuza 4, which was originally by Sega CS1 R&D, released on the PS3 in 2011, but it was re-released on the PS4 by RGG in 2019. Now, Yakuza 4 is a huge improvement over Yakuza 3, and it was the first Yakuza game to have different playable characters. You don't just play as Kiryu. Of course, Kiryu is still here, and he plays the same as he did really in 3, but the combat does feel a bit better. There's Tanimura, a sort of corrupt cop who arrests people. There's Akiyama, who kicks people, and Saejima, who's just a big powerhouse. I really liked playing as these different characters, and I like what they all brought to the table. The game is only in Kamurocho as opposed to a ton of different locations. However, this was the game that added the sewers and the rooftops to explore. When it comes to the story, it's kind of your typical Yakuza affair. It's got a pretty standard Yakuza story with a lot of corruption, evil deals, and people dying. It doesn't do anything all that groundbreaking, and it feels like a majority of the story is really trying to introduce all these new characters and get you to like them, and I think it actually does a really good job at that. I really did like all the new characters introduced. I will say though, Kiryu really doesn't do much in this game like at all. The focus is not on him. All these different characters also make for some really interesting sub-stories, as a lot of these sub-stories are very personalized to these characters and they really help flesh out these characters. Sure, they aren't the best sub-stories ever, but I still think that they are quite good. I will also say, like Yakuza 3, the presentation was pretty terrible on the PS3. The PS4 version looks a little better and the frame rate is kinda sussy, but you know, it's still generally meh. I mean, the music was okay in the game also, and this is when the Yakuza games really started getting a lot longer and a lot more open with a lot more to do, and I really can appreciate the game's length and how much stuff there is to do on the side. I really did enjoy it. And yeah, this is just a really good Yakuza game. It's a really good open world game, and I have enjoyed my time with it. And so here is Yakuza Kiwami 2. Now, Kiwami 2 is a remake of the original Yakuza 2 and was released on the PS4 in 2018. And like Kiwami 1, this is the absolute most definitive way to play Yakuza 2, as it totally just trumps the original game. It runs on the Yakuza 6 engine and naturally looks much better, and it plays much better as well. The combat is more like Yakuza 6 and is a bit more streamlined than say 0 and Kiwami, but it still is quite good. It is much better than the original Yakuza 2, which was very clunky by today's standards. It also comes with all the modern improvements the Yakuza games have made, such as a much better map system, it's easier to get around said map, the minigames are much better, and all the nice little quality of life updates. The story in Yakuza Kiwami 2 is just fantastic. It is one of the best stories in the entire series. It is just really well done, top to bottom, with one of the best antagonists, if not like the best antagonist of the whole franchise, Ryuji Goda. He is just a baller. You really come to like this dude, and I wish he was in more of the games because he is awesome here. Kiryu even has a really good love story that goes on here, and like when it just comes to the story, I just really enjoyed the story of Kiwami 2. And I thought the map was pretty awesome also. Sotenbori would go on to be one of the more prevalently used maps in the Yakuza series. The sub-stories are quite a bit better than the original games. A lot of side content has been added to this, and it's a lot goofier and honestly just better than what the original Yakuza 2 had, because some of the stuff in 2 wasn't great, but all the side stuff in Kiwami 2, oh, it's all pretty good. There's Majima's construction site, and then there's a secret part of the game where you actually get to play as Majima after you beat the main game, a little side story. It's like an hour or two, but it's actually quite cool, and it ties up some loose ends from 0. And really, there's just not all that much to say about Yakuza Kiwami 2. If you've played Yakuza before, you know what to expect, and this is as great as ever. The only reason it isn't higher is because I'm not a fan of something they actually did change from Yakuza 2. It's not that they toned the heat moves down, they're still pretty good. In Yakuza 2, there was actually a third area you got to go to pretty briefly, but it was a really cool third area, and they've just totally taken that out of the game in Kiwami 2 and added this new kind of shitty little area and section of the game. to replace that third area, and I don't like that at all. Call me a Yakuza 2 purist or whatever, but I don't like this new stuff that they put in there. I think that's the only thing that they put in new that isn't good. But all in all, it's still a great game. It really is a great game with a killer story. And here's where things get interesting. Here at number 3 we have Yakuza 5. In my original Yakuza ranking list, I had Yakuza 5 as the number 1 game. However, after coming back a couple years later to all these games, I don't think Yakuza 5 is the number 1 game, but it is still a fantastic game nonetheless. When it comes to content in the Yakuza games, I think Yakuza 5 is the absolute king of them. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 playable characters, each with their own sub-stories, side stories. There's a ton to unpack here. There's Kiryu, who plays exactly how you remember. He still plays great, and his side story is about him being a taxi driver. So you get to actually do this like taxi simulation kind of game, which is really cool, and then you even get to do some initial D-racing as well. There's Saejima, who plays pretty similar to how he did in Yakuza 4. He's a big brute, he's got some really heavy attacks and can throw people around. His side story is about him hunting down a bear, which has some really realistic hunting simulation gameplay. Akiyama returns with his awesome kicks, and he's here to help Haruka. Speaking of Haruka, for the first time ever, you get to actually play as Haruka. She's not the little girl you have to save. You get to play as her, and instead of fighting people with your fists, you actually do dance battles and dance-offs, as she is a idol now, and gets to do idol things. Despite how goofy this sounds, I actually really like playing as Haruka. I like everything she has, and I really liked her story also. And then we have newcomer Shinada, who's a former baseball player who was kicked out under shady circumstances, and his style reflects that he used to play baseball. All of the characters bring something totally different to the table, and it's all really cool stuff, and seeing it all come together is really impressive. There's not a single bad character, and I really enjoyed my long-ass time with this game. Like, this game, it takes a long time to beat this game. It took me well over 40, 50, 55 hours to beat the game, and I didn't even do like half the stuff I could have done in the game. Like, the atmosphere and the vibes and just how much content you get really speaks for itself. I really just liked all of it. There's so much variety, there's so much to do. I liked all the locations in the game pretty much. Shinada's could take it or leave it, but the other ones, they were all really nice. I did like going around these locations, and the amount of fan service that this game has for longtime Yakuza fans such as myself. It's really good. It's really great. And I think that one reason the game is so great is thanks to all this fan service and nods to the old games. And I think that someone who didn't play all the old games won't be able to appreciate this game as much. At the same time, that kind of makes this game isolating, because if you haven't played the previous 4 games, or at least a couple of the Yakuza games that came out before it, then I don't think you're going to like the game as much. And it's for this reason that I have this game a little bit lower than I did originally, because yeah, it is pretty isolating. Like, that's kind of a tall order to play a bunch of games to really get the best out of this one, but it's really worth it in my opinion. The other reason it's not at the absolute top like it was before is because going back, yeah, the story isn't exactly amazing. I think the individual stories are really good that Kiryu and Saejima and the gang have, but I think the overall story, when it tries to come together, it's not as great as it could be. I think that it is a bit messy, and I think that there are a few parts where I'm just like, it's not all that great. And I can acknowledge that it's not all that great altogether, but individually, it still is quite good. But I can't deny that Yakuza 5 is one of the very best open world games ever made. I really mean that. I really do. And at number 2, we have probably what is the favorite Yakuza game, Yakuza 0, released for the PS4 in 2017. Yakuza 0 is solely responsible for Yakuza's popularity just taking off in the West. Like, before this, we were lucky if we got any Yakuza games, and now we get them all. We get them at release now when it comes out in Japan too. It's pretty incredible. So I'm very grateful for Yakuza 0, and you know, there's a reason it's so popular, because this game's really freaking good. Yakuza 0 really just has it all. It has probably the best combat in the entire series. It's really smooth. There's a bunch of styles. You get to play as Kiryu and Majima, and playing as either of them are fantastic. They play very differently, and you just beat the shit out of a lot of people. The game has a wonderful story. It takes place in the 80s and sees Kiryu and Majima involved with this plot of land and this blind woman respectively, and it's superb. I don't want to go into any more detail about the story because I was just so like into it. I was so engaged with it, and it just keeps getting better and better. Like, it really is fantastic, and I think anybody who's played Yakuza 0 will agree that the story is as good as it gets for a Yakuza game. It really is. The game has arguably the best sub-stories in the entire franchise. There's no bad sub-story here. They are all very funny. It has a lot of cool throwbacks to the other Yakuza games taking place before, and they're just all hilarious. Like, they genuinely made me bust up tons of times. The main side stories where Kiryu is doing real estate and Majima is doing the cabaret club are really in-depth, and while I'm not the biggest fan of them, I can see the value that they bring, and they bring a lot of content to this game. And this game is probably the only game, or one of the only games, that can match Yakuza 5's content. This game also has my favorite experience and leveling up system out of all of the games, where you just beat the shit out of people so hard that money's flying all over the place, and you just level up with money. You spend money to level up, you spend money to buy stuff. It's just really cool. The music, the music is real funky. It is real 80s. It is great. It is some of the best music in the entire series. The music I haven't really mentioned for a couple games now because it's been pretty mid to meh, but Yakuza 0, it's the good stuff. Now, the biggest advantage to Yakuza 0 is it is such a great entry point to the franchise. Like, you can know nothing about Yakuza and get started with Yakuza 0 and you'll be just fine. And it really is special like that. And it's a lot of people's first game, and you know what? It's a fantastic starting point because it's just so great. I don't think you'll find many people who dislike this game or disagree with me when I say that it's one of the best open world games ever made, and that it's arguably the best Yakuza game ever made. But it's not my favorite. No, my favorite game is shockingly the newest Yakuza game, Yakuza Like a Dragon, or also Yakuza 7. I did not expect this game to be my absolute favorite Yakuza game going into it. I was a bit suspicious of it, honestly, with its new combat and characters and story, but after finishing it, yeah, I can say it's my favorite of the Yakuza games. Maybe it's just a recency bias. I finished it like a year ago to the day, but Yakuza 7 just really blew me away. I did not really know how the series could continue without getting stale or how it could get any better, and you know, they found an answer. They really did. RGG posted as like an April Fool's joke saying that Yakuza was going to become a turn-based RPG. However, people were receptive to the idea and they actually made a whole game that's a turn-based RPG, and you know, it turns out it actually like perfectly fits the Yakuza series. I'm sure it is somewhat controversial to put the turn-based RPG over all the brawler games in a series known for being brawler games, but I just really did like it more than the other ones. Maybe it's just my preference towards RPGs rather than that brawler style gameplay, but I think that it took extremely well to a turn-based RPG, and I hope that the next couple Yakuza games that are turn-based RPGs make even more refinements and improvements on the great stuff that this game established. And I really was just like, holy shit, how did they just know how to fit it in so perfectly? Like, don't get me wrong, Yakuza had a lot of RPG elements to it already. Some people would already call them action RPGs, but now it just went full RPG, and you know what? It's just some of the best RPG gameplay you'll find in the last like 10 years. It's one of the best RPGs I've ever played. I'd put it right up there with some of the best, like Dragon Quest, Persona. It's great. The combat has a shocking amount of depth to it. Like, there's character classes / jobs, there's a ton of status effects, there's tons of stats to go over. Like, there is a lot to contend with here. They did not half-ass this at all. Like, this is like a full-on RPG system, and I can really appreciate it, and I like what they did with it. And I won't lie, some parts of it aren't perfect when it comes to its RPG system. The movement around the area can be a little finicky. And I won't lie to you, some parts aren't perfect. The whole movement system where you can kind of walk around like the arena, and I was kind of suspicious of Ichiban and his crew at first, because I was like, it's not Kiryu, it's not Majima, it's not even Tak from Judgment. It's brand new. It's like, are these characters going to be likable? Are they going to be anywhere near as good as our established characters? Oh, they're great. They're given... Thanks to him alone, the sub-stories are arguably the best sub-stories in the entire franchise. I did almost all of them. I was like in love with the sub-stories. They're all so funny, they're so unique, they're so interesting, they're all really well written, and they're just goofy. A lot of them are just really goofy, and then the amount of other side content you can do, like taking the tests or doing the dragon cart, there's just a lot to it. And of course, there's tons of content. I mean, this is an RPG now. Tons of content. The new map is really well done. It is arguably like the best map of the whole series. I'm not even exaggerating. The map is just really well designed, a lot of good points to it, and a lot of interesting spots, and it looks great too. The music in this game, the music fucks. It is so good. It is the best music in Yakuza. I was like, holy shit, how did it become, what the fuck? I did not expect the music to be this good, like this far into the series, and this is how you completely revitalize a franchise, renew a ton of interest in it, and just basically reestablish it, restart it almost. Like, there are so many directions they could go in now, and I know that the head of Yakuza, the creator of Yakuza and Monkey Ball, has left, but they have like unlimited directions to go with this game now, with the series really. But all in all, I am very excited for what the future holds for Yakuza, because I think it's just going to be great. They're going to continue this great RPG gameplay and its excellent story. But not just Yakuza I'm excited for in the future, but RGG as a whole. They've really become Sega's leading developer, really one of their only developers, the ones that you could at least give a shit about, and just about everything they touch is gold, minus a Monkey Ball game. But besides that, yeah, not even close. They're awesome. They're one of the best developers in Japan, and that really says something. And I have no problem saying that if any of these games have looked interesting to you and you somehow made it to this part of the video, do not even think twice about it. Just try it. Just try it. These games you can get for dirt cheap. A bunch of them are on Game Pass. Like, just try them. It's not going to hurt you. It really won't. It's going to enhance your life, if anything. This is not a sponsored video, by the way. I just really like RGG, and again, long-time fan, big-time fan, long-time fan. Anyway, if you made it to this part of the video, all I gotta say is you're a real trooper. You really made it all the way. This video took a long time to make. It had a lot of stuff behind it. I really care about all these games. I can say if you've made it to this part of the video, comment down below bricks. That's our keyword. I'll know you made it to the end of the video. If I see that, you're going to get a nice heart from me. And please share with your friends. Share with somebody you know, like especially if you want to get someone into the Yakuza series or want to get someone exposed to RGG as a whole. Please share somewhere. Would very much appreciate it. And yeah, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Like, comment, sub. If you haven't told me your favorite game or bricks or whatever, I really don't know what else to say other than thank you. Thank you for everything. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was that initial Yakuza video that my channel got popular from. So everyone have a wonderful time. See ya.